The second half is started and the Rangers are so back. On today's show, I'm breaking down why this sweep of the Cleveland Guardians was exactly what the Rangers needed, and not just a sweep, but the type of sweep they had to gain confidence to win the AL West. All that and more on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to the Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan since 2010, the founder and host for all 5 seasons of this Locked On Rangers podcast. Today is Monday, July 17th. Your Rangers are 55-39, alone atop the AL West, 3.5 games ahead of the Houston Astros at time of this recording, which could end up being 3 or 4 games depending on how this Sunday night baseball game goes. Thank you all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers. Subscribe on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment nearly any single thing below. On today's show, we are breaking down this sweep, why it was so crucial for the Rangers to win, not just win all 3 games, but win them like they did. But before we do, this episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. For parts that fit, head to eBay Motors and look for the green check. Stay in the game with eBay Guaranteed Fit. ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Now, the Rangers offense really woke up in this weekend series with a couple of really clutch comeback wins against a team with the best bullpen in all of baseball in terms of ERA, in terms of, I believe, strikeout rate, in terms of the amount of inherited runners that were left stranded. This is one of the best bullpens in baseball, and thankfully, the Rangers didn't have to face the guy who's basically the best closer in all of baseball, the former Ranger great Emmanuel Clase, because I think it might have been a little bit of a different story if they did. But the rest of the relievers in this Cleveland pen are really good. Cleveland has been a team that has developed pitching very, very well, and for their guys who didn't work out as starting pitchers because their rotation is so deep, they just throw those guys in the pen and, just let them chuck absolute gas. But the Rangers had a comeback win on Friday night and on Sunday afternoon. The Rangers, before this series, they were 1-23 when trailing after 6 innings. Now, they are 3-23 when trailing after 6 innings. Now, I mean, it's not going to be a lot of teams that have a winning record in those situations because, I mean, you're not going to come back all the time. But this is a team, even though they had won a lot of games heading into this All-Star break, and it was a really rough stretch, those 30 games in 31 days, you could just tell that this team was absolutely exhausted in that series against the Nationals. And even that series against Boston really kind of felt like, all right, this team is just absolutely gassed and needed some time off. And it looks like they look like a rejuvenated team. They look a lot like the team that we saw in the first half be absolutely dominant for month and a half, 2-month stretches that were basically unbeatable for the first 2 months of the season. And, everything kind of felt like it was coming crashing back down to earth. The Rangers fan PTSD definitely set in those last, 2 to 3 weeks after that series with the Cardinals, once they started going to Tampa Bay and started that stretch of the 30 games. It felt like everything was crashing back down to earth, and oh my gosh, everything's mirage, everything's terrible, everything's going to crap, and no one's actually any that good. Well, I mean, the sample size was there enough that this team is actually good. They had flaws in their roster, for sure. This offense probably wasn't going to keep hitting like Babe Ruth with runners in scoring positions, but they also weren't going to do as poorly as they did for that, 2-3 week stretch. I mean, they were capable of turning it back on, and we kind of saw that, and I saw them win in new ways in this weekend series. I mean, blasting 5 runs in the bottom of the 7th inning and then 4 more for good measure in the bottom of the 8th inning on Friday against this Cleveland pen was absolutely huge, absolutely massive. It was just a 1-run deficit heading into the bottom of that 7th inning, and the Rangers weren't content to just score a couple runs, give themselves a couple run lead. They scored 5, and then even though the game was not quite out of hand, it was, I believe, a 4-run lead at that point, they dropped 4 more runs, hit 3 home runs in the bottom of the 8th inning, and this is that deadly offense that we saw early on. An offense that is never satisfied. We're up by 8-0. Cool. We're going to pile on more and more and more runs. That was the offense that we saw that was so dominant in that series against Seattle, in the first series of the year against the Phillies, against basically every Sunday afternoon game. It felt like this offense would just erupt for billion runs for the first couple of months of the season. That really wasn't the case on Sunday in this game. But they did erupt for 4 runs in the 8th inning, a comeback win again, and just fantastic at-bats, or I guess plate appearances, by everybody in the top of that lineup. Leo Taveras was out, and it started with a 1-out rally with Marcus Semien working a walk, then Corey Seager working a walk, then a big hit from Nathaniel Lowe, then a big hit from Adolis Garcia, then another big hit from Josh Jung, who had been out of the fun for the entirety of this game. But the first pitch he saw, he drove into left field, smashed it through the shortstop and third baseman hole, and got the Rangers that 1-run lead. And it was okay. Well, the Rangers have a 1-run lead, and Will Smith just pitched yesterday, pitched an inning in 2/3, even though he didn't throw all that many pitches. It's like, okay, well, the Rangers' bullpen situation has changed a little bit. They do have Adolis Chapman there. He had already pitched in 2 straight days, so he definitely wasn't going to be available for a 3rd straight day. And so the Rangers went to Will Smith, and he closed it up. We're going to talk a little bit more about that bullpen and the different roles in the second segment. But this was a huge win for the Rangers, winning in a 1-run game, winning in comeback fashion, and having the offense come back. I mean, that is something that they haven't done. And good teams, great teams, need to learn how to win in multiple ways. And for the most part, the Rangers just clobbered teams to death in the first half. That's basically what they did. And that works. And you can do that a little bit when you have an offense that is rolling like this, that was on the kind of hot streak that this offense was on. But you're not always going to win games like that. This weekend was full of all kinds of different games, a couple of different comeback wins. One was a 1-run win. One was a very low-scoring win where the Rangers didn't have any hits with runners in scoring position. On Saturday, they went 0 for 4. They did still score 2 runs, and the Rangers' pitching was enough to make that stick. A 5 1/3 innings of scoreless baseball from Andrew Heaney. That was probably his best start in a long, long time. He really needed a bounce-back start. Only 1 walk for him, 4 strikeouts. I did think they were very quick to pull the trigger on taking Heaney out of the game, even though it felt like he was rolling. He allowed a double and got 1 out in that 6th inning, and it was Grant Anderson time, and that was it. And I think that's probably going to be the move for the Rangers moving on. And they were able to get a solid inning out of Grant Anderson. They were able to get an inning 2/3 of scoreless baseball out of Will Smith, and then a save from Aroldis Chapman, his 3rd of the season, his 1st as a Ranger with a couple of Ks, and the hardest pitch that any Rangers pitcher has ever thrown in the StatCast area at 102.5 miles per hour to finish that save off. And he's got a 2.10 ERA on the season. It seems like he and Will Smith are going to split time as the Rangers closer moving forward, which will be helpful because the Rangers lost Josh Sborz. We're going to talk about the impact of that, what the Rangers are going to need to do with their pen, and a little bit more about the importance of this series heading into the next one. But first, this word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Want the chance to win more money with less picks? Head to Sleeper, where you can win up to 100 times your money on just 2 or more fantasy baseball picks. The Rangers take on the Rays tonight. They start a series, so they are going up against Shane McClanahan. If you're wanting to bet against Shane McClanahan having a good game, he has a lot of good games, and if you feel good about this Rangers offense and what they're doing right now, then you can make some bets on them crushing Shane McClanahan. If you want to win up to 100 times your money on daily fantasy baseball, Sleeper is now officially offering up to a 100 times payout for up to 8 pick contests. Choose as many as 8 players that you like and pick more or less on your favorite baseball stats like home runs, strikeouts, hits, and more. Get your picks right and you could win big. Use promo code LOCKEDON and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. Shout out to the Everydayers for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. On Tuesday's show, I'll be talking about what the Rangers' trade targets should be at the deadline. The Rangers take on the Rays this week. You can catch every pitch with the hometown broadcast on SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search Rangers. Now, it seems like the Rangers are going to have a closer by committee, except the committee is just 2 different people. It's going to be Aroldis Chapman, and it's going to be Will Smith. Smith said that it doesn't bother him. He just wants to win, and I don't know that Aroldis Chapman said much of anything when it comes to this, but Josh Sborz has been placed on the IL. He has a bicep, I believe, tendonitis. Here we go. Yeah, he has placed on the 15-day IL, and that is a rough blow for the Rangers. It kind of explains and makes me feel a little bit better about the rough last few outings. That right bicep tendonitis for Josh Sborz. It was retroactive to Saturday, so it was on Saturday, and it was retroactive to Wednesday, so he'll be eligible to return on July 27th. So it had been a rough last few outings for Josh Sborz. He had been a huge revelation for the Rangers in the back end of their pen, and one of the more reliable back end arms that they had. But with him blowing up the last couple of times, I thought, okay, well, maybe everything is coming back down to earth. Maybe the Josh Sborz that we saw for 2 years before this, maybe that's more the version of Josh Sborz as opposed to the version of Josh Sborz we saw in May and June. But it seems like if that is just an injury and that flaring up, then that makes me feel much, much better about the state of this bullpen moving forward. Because, I mean, you look behind, Will Smith, and you look behind Adolis Chapman, and there is not a whole lot of backing guys that I feel super duper comfortable with. I mean, Brock Burke is definitely one of them. We saw Cody Bradford go 3 innings in relief of Martin Perez on Sunday. That was huge. He was mostly very good, allowed his first runs in relief, which was a 2-run bomb, unfortunately. But the Rangers offense didn't care. They still came back and were able to get the win in that one. But behind that, you have Grant Anderson, you have John King. Jose Leclerc is starting to look better. And then you have Glenn Otto, who has been used almost exclusively in multi-inning outings. And I would like to see him get a lot more, 1-inning outings, or see if that fastball can start ticking up a little bit, because we've seen how good the breaking ball is. We've seen how good that plays as a reliever. He's had multiple different outings with a bunch of strikeouts, including his last outing against the Nationals when he went 2 innings with 4 strikeouts. That was huge. That was absolutely huge, and he looked very, very good in that outing and only allowed 1 walk. So I think having him go 1 or 2 innings would be, we better see if that fastball can start to play up. But if the velocity isn't going up, then I don't know how much I love Glenn Otto being a part of this bullpen, because the Rangers don't really need a bulk reliever outside of Cody Bradford. Cody Bradford has filled that role very, very well, and I don't think that we need to see 2 guys in the pen that are both fulfilling the same role. We could see some of the arms from AAA start to come up a little bit, and some of the guys who are having great seasons there, see if there's anything there. But there's going to be more 40-man roster, I don't know, shenanigans. Not shenanigans is not the right word, but they're going to make some moves on the 40-man roster and make some decisions about these relievers who are not doing well. Jonathan Hernandez has started to look a little bit better down in AAA, and I'm starting to feel like maybe those mechanical adjustments that he was making are starting to pay off, because, I mean, I don't really love seeing John King in the Rangers bullpen, especially not in any kind of high leverage situation. He's had a couple of outings where he's been successful, but for the most part, I'm still kind of wary of trusting Jose Leclerc. I think of the guys that are outside of the big 3 that are there right now, and the big lefties in Aroldis Chapman and Brock Burke and Will Smith, I think Leclerc is probably the guy who I trust the next most, even a little bit more than Grant Anderson. I think Grant Anderson might be a little bit of a flash in the pan, there's a lot of deception there. There's just not a lot of great stuff, and if it works, then great. But when it doesn't, we've seen there's not a whole lot of margin for error. We've seen the lefties pretty much crush him. So, he's not necessarily the guy who I want in a lot of high leverage situations, and the Rangers pen has been so depleted these days, especially without Josh Sborz for the next couple of weeks. Then they are going to be in a rough way, which is why I think they're going to make some kind of big trade for some other reliever besides just the move for Aroldis Chapman that they already made. But this Rangers team is very, very complete. And when you look at the offense, there's really not much room for it to improve outside of basically the DH spot. Duran has been having a rough week, I should say. It's been a little bit of him coming back down to earth. I don't think that this means that everything that he did in the first half is fraudulent, or he's going to, be terrible, and the Rangers should just include him in some kind of trade package now while his value is sky high. I don't think that's the case. I think he is a legitimate everyday potential big league shortstop who's a guy who could have an 850-ish OPS right now. It's 850 exactly on the season after his rough day where he was pinch hit for Robbie Grossman, which is a move that I really don't get. Robbie Grossman has just been very blah this season. And there is one thing that I do like about Grossman's game, and I wish that you could kind of, what's the word, Voltron players together. Because if you could do that with Robbie Grossman and Ezekiel Duran, I think you would have maybe the best player on the freaking planet. Because the thing that Robbie Grossman does very, very well is he does not chase and he walks. And that is basically the one thing that Ezekiel Duran does not do. Robbie Grossman, his chase rate is in the 99th percentile in all of baseball. His swing and miss rate is in the top 26%, is the 74th percentile of all of baseball. Now, somehow, even though he's not swinging and missing that much, he is still in the 35th percentile of strikeout rate. I don't know how that happens. I think that just means that he's only swinging and missing when there are 2 strikes, which is the exact time when you're trying to not swing and miss. And his walk rate is in the 62nd percent of baseball. But, I mean, defensively, we thought we were getting... I thought that the Rangers were getting somebody who was competent in a corner outfield. But looking at his defensive WAR numbers for the last, several years, it has been profoundly negative. I mean, right now on Baseball Reference, he is a negative .6 WAR player. Negative 0.6. That is how bad he has been. Most of that has been defense. His D-WAR is negative 0.8. His O-WAR is negative 0.2. Somehow that adds up to negative 0.6. I'm not really sure. I thought he would be fine for the Rangers, but so far he has been just not very good, and I don't really get why he is getting so many plate appearances, especially against righties. He has been much worse hitting against righties as opposed to lefties. Against righties, he has a 609 OPS this season and a 779 OPS against left-handed pitchers. He has 3 home runs in 80 plate appearances versus lefties and 4 home runs in 182 plate appearances against righties. Why he has 182 plate appearances against righties, I do not understand. And that is one of the few things that Bochy has done that has really made me scratch my head and say, okay, why is Grossman playing this much? And it's not just this year. I mean, for his career, he's got a 789 OPS versus left-handed pitchers and a 693 OPS against righties. So nearly 100 points better against lefties than against righties. I really don't love seeing him out there. I don't love seeing him in the field. I think Ezekiel Duran, even though he is much more inexperienced in left field, I think that his ability, just his raw athleticism, his speed, and his arm out there just makes him an overall much better player, even though he doesn't get great reads. I mean, neither does Robbie Grossman. Robbie Grossman's outfielder jump is in the 15th percent of all of baseball. As a guy who's been playing the outfield for so long, I don't understand how it's that bad and why the Rangers keep feeling the need to put him out there in left field. But I don't know. It's fine. They've got 2 guys on their team who are DH / basically just DH only guys in Brad Miller and Robbie Grossman as guys. If you're DH only, you should probably hit very well, and neither of those guys have. But I don't know, maybe the rest of the Rangers offense, that's why they're doing so well. They're just zapping the power. They're doing the all Monstar kind of thing that they do in Space Jam of just taking all of the power from Brad Miller and Robbie Grossman and redistributing it to everybody else on the team. If that's what's happening, then keep those guys on the roster and keep doing that. Because if they're going to if everybody else is going to start to regress by not being able to take powers from Robbie Grossman and Brad Miller, then I don't know. Whatever you're doing, it's working. Even though it's frustrating to see Robbie Grossman get this many plate appearances and not see as many from Mitch Garver. Coming up, we're going to look at a Rangers trade that was already made. It's been a little frustrating and a little bit of a look ahead at this series against the Tampa Bay Rays. But first, this word from our sponsors. Shout out to the Everydayers for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. On Wednesday's show, I'll talk about why the AL West is so very winnable for the Texas Rangers specifically. The Rangers take on the Rays this week. You can catch every pitch with the hometown broadcast on SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search Rangers. Now, the Rangers are winning in all kinds of different ways, and it has been very, very nice to see, especially the offensive explosion that it felt like it had been forever since the Rangers had scored double-digit runs in a game, in that Friday game, and doing it against such an elite bullpen, against bullpen arms. They did it against basically everybody in that game. Aaron Savali had a really, really good game, limiting the Rangers to just 2 runs in his 5 innings of work, but the Rangers did it against Morgan, against Sandlin, against Henches. They really let loose on him, and De Los Santos as well as Morris. Literally everybody got scored on in the pan except for Sandlin. He was the only one who kept the Rangers off the board in that Friday night explosion by Texas's offense. The Rangers also got a pretty solid start from John Gray. He did get tagged for a pair of 2-run homers by the Naylor brothers in the same inning, but that was basically all he gave up, and I was really really impressed by Jon Gray just buckling down and getting the Rangers those 6 innings of work. So they only needed 3 innings from the pen and 3 pretty high leverage innings from the pen. Outside of that last one wasn't really as high leverage from Jose Leclerc, but they only had to use Burke and Chapman in that game, and both of those guys were absolutely nails when they came in and kept the Rangers in it. And the offense going 8 for 18 with runners in scoring position on Friday was absolutely massive. But I was just really proud of Jon Gray, who's been kind of rough the last few starts, basically since that complete game 1-0 loss against the Cardinals, which is when it felt like everything started falling off the rails, was right after that. Jon Gray had just had a rough time stringing together multiple good starts, and it was good to see him just get back on the hill and feel a lot better about himself. Speaking of guys who had some great starts, Cole Ragans finally made his debut with the Kansas City Royals, and he looked absolutely fantastic against this Rays team. And it was a little frustrating just seeing the kind of gas that he was spitting. I mean, it was absolutely fantastic. It was 99.5 miles an hour is what he topped out at, which was just nuts because we had never seen him top out at that with the Rangers. We'd seen him, dial it up just a little bit, just a little bit, but still having him go out and have 5 innings of 1-run ball, just 2 walks, 4 hits, 1 earned run against the Tampa Bay Rays. Only had 3 strikeouts, and one of them was the first batter that he faced. But still, good for Kansas City, and good for Cole Ragans. I'm happy for that kid. He is a great kid, and I think he's going to be a guy who the Rangers look back on, and if he's having a great career, like I think he probably will. I mean, he's a guy who had 2 Tommy John surgeries, one like literally right off the back of the last one. I mean, the fact that he's even pitching and in the major leagues is huge for him, and I'm really happy for him. I'm bummed that was what the price was to get Aroldis Chapman, who is a very good pitcher and helps out the Rangers, but I was still a little surprised that it was basically just Cole Ragans and a basically lotto ticket teenager in the Dominican Summer League. But that trade has the potential to look very, very painful for the Rangers in years in the future. I don't think that there was really anywhere that Cole Ragans was going to help this team more than being traded, but good for him, and congratulations to him on his success. Hopefully he can still be good, but not when he is facing off against the Rangers, just when he is facing off against teams like the Rays, who the Rangers will be taking on this week. It is going to be another huge series. The Rays have been much more beatable as of late. They haven't been as insane, and they've definitely been more beatable on the road as well. So this is a team where the Rangers, I think, have the starting pitching, and 2 out of 3 games, I'd say the Rangers have the edge in starting pitching. On Wednesday, it is going to be Jon Gray versus TBD. On the Tuesday game, it's Nate Eovaldi versus Taj Bradley. And on Monday's game, of course, today, is Dane Dunning versus Shane McClanahan. Also kind of wild that it's not just the biggest ever advantage to Shane McClanahan versus Dane Dunning. McClanahan is coming off. This is going to be his first start after he missed a couple weeks with injury. He did not pitch in the All-Star game. He might be the best pitcher. He might be the AL Cy Young winner this year. I really think he just might be, because he has been so freaking good. And the Rangers saw him earlier this season, and they were able to get to him for 3 runs at home, which was something that not a lot of teams had been able to do. But it has been tough sledding for anybody trying to go up against Shane McClanahan. I think it's going to be very, very tough for the Rangers, but I have full confidence in them. I mean, coming off this sweep, this is exactly what this team needed. It was just such a rough watch the last 2-3 weeks, seeing those 30 games in 31 days again and again and again. And I think that just having that time off, even though a lot of the guys didn't get time off, the 6 All-Stars, they had a pretty busy weekend, but it seems like those guys are back to being themselves. And I think one guy who really, really needed the time off, who did not go to All-Star weekend, was Nathaniel Lowe. And Lowe has looked fantastic for the last 7 games, and he has been looking a whole lot more like the Silver Slugger Nathaniel Lowe that we saw last season. And in the last 7 games, he's got a home run, he's got 3 walks and 6 strikeouts, hitting .353 and on base of .419 and slugging .571. That is the kind of Nathaniel Lowe that the Texas Rangers need. They need Lowe to be the best version of himself. He has already stepped up quite a bit defensively, that's great, and that is honestly huge for the Rangers, and they just need him to step up a little bit more offensively. He's got his OPS over 800, so now basically every everyday regular in the Rangers lineup has an OPS over 800 outside of just Marcus Semien, who is all the way up to 773 after his 12th home run of the season and having a multi-hit day. Actually, no, I don't think he did have a multi-hit day. That is, I'm confusing that with a different time. But he was able to reach base multiple times, multiple walks, I should say, not multiple hits, a solo shot to start off the game in the bottom of the first inning, and then a big walk that started that rally in the 8th inning. Marcus Semien is really the engine that makes this team go. It feels super cliche to say, because it is super cliche to say, but I mean, when Marcus Semien gets on base, good things happen for the Texas Rangers. When Marcus Semien is at his peak, I mean, when he was thriving in April and May, that's when the Rangers were winning most of their games. When he started to slump a little bit in June, that's when this team also started to slump. So I think there's a really, really big correlation in how Marcus Semien goes, this team goes. But especially Nathaniel Lowe. Last year, the first half was pretty underwhelming. He did have 12 home runs in the first half of the season before the All-Star break last year, but he only had a 752 OPS this year. It was a little bit higher in the first half. But in the second half last year, that's when he really just took off and went nuts. That's Nathaniel Lowe. He had a 964 OPS in that second half, hit 339 with an on-base just 1 point below 400, and slugged 566. 15 home runs, 13 doubles, 2 triples in just 301 plate appearances. If the Rangers can get a second half from Nathaniel Lowe like that, this team is in business. This team is going to be even more dangerous than they already have been. I mean, Corey Seager feels like he has been an unstoppable robot baseball mashing machine, and it feels like that's just going to continue. Hopefully he can stay healthy, not have any more hamstring injuries, and just stay on the field and keep mashing. But if you, at any point, get all three of the top three in that order all going at the same time in Marcus Semien and Corey Seager and Nathaniel Lowe, I mean, good Lord, that is going to be incredibly dangerous and incredibly difficult to pitch against, especially when, you get through those three guys, and then here's Adolis Garcia, who's one of the best power hitters in baseball, and here's Josh Jung, who's one of the best rookies, if not the best rookie in the American League so far. And then, you get through him. Here's your all-star starting catcher in Jonah Heim. You get through them. There's Ezekiel Duran, who's got an 850 OPS as a Swiss Army knife. You get through him. Then here's Travis Jankowski, who's got an on-base of nearly 400, or I think at 400. You get through him. Here's Leo Taveras, who should have probably been an all-star this year and is hitting just under 300 and has got 10 home runs as a Gold Glove defender in center field. So, I mean, this team is in a really, really good way. It was very understandable for everyone to feel like the sky is falling. I kind of felt like that myself heading into the All-Star break, especially with just how rough that series against the Nationals was, and all of those winnable games that the Rangers lost against the Nationals, against Boston, and especially against Houston. That series was just really painful, and you thought, okay, that was your chance to get a Houston Astros team that was not really doing all that well in a bunch of games that were very close. The Rangers could have won, especially if they could have salvaged that insane Monday game where they were down by 8 runs and battled all the way back to get the lead, and if they didn't lose that 1-run game, then that would have been, I think, much, much bigger and for the Rangers' confidence. But, I mean, they're still in a very, very good position. Heading into the Sunday game, they had a 94.1% chance to make the postseason. According to Baseball Reference, they had a 13.5% chance to win the World Series. I still think this team is in such a good position and is so well set up. And you can't forget Bruce Bochy's influence, Bruce Bochy's importance, how many times Bruce Bochy has been in situations like this, how I feel much more confident with him at the helm than I have with literally any other Rangers manager ever. He is a future Hall of Famer for a reason. There is a reason he has 3 rings and has been to the World Series 4 times. He is a proven winner. He knows what buttons to push, and he is not going to freak out nearly as much as the rest of us are when this team goes through any kind of slump, because he knows this team has what it takes to make it to the postseason and hopefully win the World Series. That's going to do it for today's show. Thank y'all so much for listening and subscribing, and until next time, don't forget to enjoy first place Texas Rangers baseball.